All right, so I'm excited to bring on our next guest. We have Nate Stroeher and Braden Gerbig from Third Stage Consulting. And like I said before, we're going to talk today about a case study into a large medical device manufacturer that we're working with to help them with their digital strategy and their roadmap for 2021 and beyond. Nate and Braden, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. So we wanted to talk a bit about a current client engagement we're working on. And you two in particular are among the team from Third Stage working on this engagement. It's a digital transformation strategy type of project. So we can't talk client names or real specifics around client-sensitive types of information, but I would like to talk about and ask you guys some questions about this project and what some of the different nuances of helping this particular client define their digital strategy. But before we get to that, maybe you could tell us a little bit about this client. What is it they do? How many employees do they have? What industry are they in? Maybe just give us a quick overview, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, I'll jump in and take that. We have a client that's a large medical device manufacturer with several over 40 different divisions within the organization. They came to us. Their specific division had around 40,000 employees, and they came to us hoping to have a little bit different project than we normally do. They came to us for advice and to guide them through a transformation project that didn't so much look at a specific platform, but help them get a technology strategy around a more of a client and customer focus view of the technology that we were going to help them with.
Great. Yeah, and as we get into the new year here in 2021, that's one of the things we wanted to chat with you guys about is just what are some of the lessons we can take away and the audience can take away as they're defining their digital transformation strategies for the new year. So maybe help us understand what was the scope of the work we've done so far with this client in terms of defining the digital transformation strategy and our role in that. Maybe just help us understand that situation.
Yeah, why don't I start off and I'll give you a little high level and then Braden can get a little more specific. But like I mentioned earlier, this client really wanted to have a focus less on a certain platform or a certain technology, but more on an end-to-end process. So they came to we traditionally get a call where someone will ask us, hey, I want to replace my ERP package, my CRM package, or an HCM package. This client actually came to us and said, I can get that answer fairly quickly. What I want you guys to help me with is that end-to-end process and really focus on one certain aspect of our business where we can look at the best technology available today, but more so available in the future that's going to enhance this entire experience. And I'll let Braden explain a little more how we went about that.
Sure. Thanks, Nate. We really did look at end-to-end primarily from a customer perspective. So historically, the company hasn't been focused on the customer experience in terms of systems or strategy. So we use that as a starting point really to build our overall strategy, focus on the customer, and how do we enhance the systems, kind of a blue sky, if you will, in terms of what systems can we improve, processes, people, et cetera, in order to improve the overall customer experience. So it really started at the beginning of the business from an integrated planning standpoint all the way through to delivery and handling any kind of after delivery challenges such as returns or customer interaction. So it touched on all the major systems in and around the ERP, and we considered all options during the process.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about how they weren't driven necessarily by technology or technology replacement, But one thing I don't know if you mentioned so far, but our client contact at this client is the CIO, and so an IT person, very technical, very smart person. And what was it that led the CIO to the conclusion that we needed to not just replace the technology, but to focus on customer experience and end-to-end business processes? Was there some sort of business driver or strategic imperative or shift in the market that was leading them down this path?
Yeah, I think overall it was really to focus on the challenges that consistently presented themselves in terms of a division operating in a much larger company. So setting the strategy for that division in hopes that that strategy would continue throughout the rest of the organization. So I think this, I don't want to speak for the CIO, but I think he felt that there was a need to set a strategy that could be communicated consistently with other similar divisions, but also at the company level to say that this is something that we need to continually focus on and consistently push in order to address the gaps that we currently have.
I think to just elaborate on that is twofold. To really make the one division that we were focusing on as sort of the test case, and to really work on that division and iron out the kinks and figure out how to take that to the rest of the organization. And then the second and the more important piece that Braden hit on is the really overused phrase, but to make IT more of a strategic player in the organization. And the one comment he made over and over again when we first met this client, you and I, Eric, that was that he said, I can go through and I can get the latest and greatest technology, and in 3 years you'll be back and we'll get the latest and greatest technology, and we'll always be playing catch up. And he said, what I want to do is I want to look at where we are now, where we want to be, and this end-to-end customer experience, and how can we position ourselves so that we're taking pieces of the technology and constantly replacing it, but it's the overall experience and it's that overall interaction that's really the driving force, not the technology getting old, replacing it, getting old, replacing it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. And you're alluding to another thought that I had or question I have, or maybe it's more of a comment in that when you and I first talked to him, Nate, I remember him saying that it was sort of a I don't know if it was a political situation, but it more of, he wanted to proactively address the organizational dynamic of he didn't want the global CIO or the global organization to be telling him what his strategy and roadmap is going to be. He wanted to have a proactive solution in place that he could take to his higher ups and say, hey, here's our vision, here's our strategy, here's our roadmap for our group. And they are such a big organization where it makes sense to have different parts of the business, with potentially different strategic roadmaps. But I found that very interesting because a lot of times people will kind of wait for the mandate to come down from the top that, hey, this is the direction we're going and this is what you need to do. But he sort of reversed that and said, well, I want to be able to take this to the executive team and to the global team and say, this is my vision. And, there might be some reconciliation that would need to happen, but he wanted to get ahead of that, which I found very, very interesting. Now, I know this wasn't about technology replacement per se, but there obviously is a technology component in what we were evaluating when we were defining the overall strategy and roadmap for the transformation. But what was the lay of the land of the technical environment? I mean, what situation are they in right now that they're looking for help migrating away from?
Well, there's a number of systems that we evaluated. The ERP primarily looking at SAP as the legacy, and then a number of both homegrown and off-the-shelf applications as well, in terms of customer ordering, planning, manufacturing, logistics, etc. There was quite a number of systems. Really, the challenge was tying those systems together within the larger organization, and getting those systems to follow the strategy, which is handling a number of different manufacturing locations, logistical locations, all of those different offices and divisions and everything else working in conjunction with the larger organization.
Yep. Okay. Interesting. Fairly complex environment, fairly complex landscape that they're in now, and with the shifting market and their view and their focus on end-to-end processes and customer experience, it sounds like there was a lot for us as a team to be thinking about as we evaluated and helped define this roadmap. As we are going through this exercise, and as we've been going through this exercise so far with this client, what are some of the interesting takeaways or observations or surprises that you came across in this project so far?
Yeah, I think for me in general, it was just simplifying the landscape. The business is very complex. Just as a template, the business is complex. So, trying to simplify the systems landscape in a complicated environment was probably the biggest challenge. How do we do more with less, more consistently, and do we consider other systems to migrate to, or do we keep what we have and clean it up? But overall, just the simplification, I think, of systems in general was probably the thing that was the most aha moment for us in terms of making the customer experience better.
And I think Braden and I talked about this earlier today. I think the one thing that made us real successful with this client was the ability to really take and boil things down to very simple buckets, for lack of a better phrase, to say, how can we make sure that we're doing what we need to do to the best of our ability today? And that's one bucket. And then the other bucket is how can we start to think strategically, and what are the things that we need to be doing in the future to make us a strategic driver within the organization. And then literally taking it, and you can always break down the divisions, but we simply looked at it as people, process, and technology. And again, there's 1,000 different classifications you can make, but really trying to put everything into that bucket so that every time you go to the client, you can say, here's where we stand on these three areas, and these are our, doing the things to the best of our ability and strategically focused. It really simplifies things, and I hate to narrow it down to just a bunch of bullets, but that really kind of is how, when you do that, you've got a methodology that you can have everyone on the same page as far as what we're doing and where we need to go.
What are some of the core components of that digital transformation strategy that we've defined with this client? And maybe I should back up and say it's not even really necessarily a digital transformation strategy. It's more of a transformation strategy from what I'm gathering here and my understanding of this client. But what are some of the the key components or the key work streams or recommendations we've made as part of that strategy for this client?
Yeah, I'd say starting at the beginning of the process, I think looking at integrated business planning, how do we become more dynamic and flexible, managing across multiple business units on a real-time basis. That's not only from a manufacturing and forecasting perspective, but also from a systems perspective in terms of integration and some of the challenges that go along with understanding data from multiple systems at the front end, especially when we're creating a forecast for a very specialized product. So the other components along the lines of specialized product would be looking at the manufacturing process. How do we streamline and what's available system-wise to streamline that process as well, but also looking at some of the physical aspects of manufacturing in terms of plant locations and some of the overall shipping and logistics that go into getting the product to the customer. We also had a huge component in terms of customer or patient management in terms of the insurance piece of the business. So looking at some of the systems that handle claims and some of the patient processes that occurred in that cycle. So we had some creative ideas about, uh, again, simplifying the landscape and trying to keep in mind that the customer experience was the most important thing.
Right. Nate, would you add anything to that, or any other thoughts you have around that?
I think Brendan pretty much hit it, but I think again, to just kind of just take a step back and really, again, kind of focus on what we have to do right and making sure we're doing that the best that we're doing, and then going to the overall strategy and knowing that that's not an overnight task. So when we talk about all the things that we focused on, we're talking on a lot of these. Systems that we looked at for the client, they weren't going away overnight. So this was really a matter of where we are now, where we're going, and what that roadmap looks like to get to the next stage. So it's not just a matter of replace this today and put this in place tomorrow, but it's how do we get that long-term strategy in place.
So when you guys were helping define this strategy and roadmap for the client, they're in the medical device industry, as you guys mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, which in some ways is an essential business, and in other parts of the business it's non-essential. So that as far as the impact that COVID and economic uncertainty has had on this client, how has that affected the way you guys worked with this client to define that strategy and roadmap? So in other words, is this the same process and the same end result that would have happened 2 years ago, as it would be in a post-COVID world here in 2021, or how has that affected? How has the current reality of today affected that, or has it affected how you approached it?
Well, I'd say just at the team level, everything we do now is remote. So the challenge there is, not being able to walk the halls, so to speak, but rather doing everything online. But the interview process still remains the same. It's very much getting to know the client, getting to know their challenges, and translating those into our experiences and how we can best help the client.
And I think to add on that, the one thing I think we focused on, we've all heard over the last 9 months, is sort of how we're all reacting to COVID. But I think, for lack of a better way to explain it, I think the one thing we need to talk about is how we're reacting to a changing environment. So today we might be talking about not being able to go to a concrete workplace. We're going to have a lot more virtual commuting and virtual interaction. But really, kind of what does that what do things look like in the future when the next global pandemic, or the next shift in technology, or the next major event happens? Because we'll look back at COVID and we'll say, okay, that was a blip in the radar, and we're obviously, you hear the phrases like there's a new norm and there's everything else, but there's going to be some other shift, be it in 1 year, 10 years, whatever, that we're going to have to react to, and how are we adapted to be able to change to that, and how quick are we on our feet technology wise to be able to take a change in the market and really adjust to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little disappointed to hear that you were doing this all remotely, because I myself haven't traveled in 10 months or gotten on an airplane in 10 months. So I was hoping this might be an excuse to get to travel finally, but apparently not.
No.
So no such luck there. What about the strategy itself? As far as you talked about how we interacted with the client, and how that looks quite a bit different today than it might have looked a year or two ago. But were there any material changes or considerations in the actual strategy and roadmap that we laid out for this client that is materially different because of the world we're in now, or in the post-COVID world? Or is it kind of like they're kind of marching ahead with on a trajectory that they're already heading down even before COVID hit? I mean, how's that affected the overall strategy for this client?
I think this client there was probably less of a focus with the customer on this client, with one-to-one interactions. But So with this customer, or with this client, I don't think it was as focused on that. But Braden, you can probably say there was still some minor changes in their business that we did need to address because of COVID.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think every business has been impacted by COVID and what we've had to adjust to over the past 9 months. But I think generally speaking, you're talking about a product that gets shipped to a customer that needs, oftentimes needs the product on either short notice or a quick term basis because of the nature of the product. And so, it's really getting better at handling the customer experience from a patient claims perspective in terms of navigating the healthcare industry in this kind of environment. Systematically, that presents a number of challenges. But generally speaking, I think the strategy is sound regardless of current events. I think whether we were experiencing COVID or, as Nate said, some other kind of issue outside our control, the strategy would still be sound in any circumstance.
Yeah, that's a good word of wisdom, and I think it's something that it's a good lesson for a lot of clients, because I think a lot of clients we work with tend to get fixated on COVID and what are we going to do right now and how are we going to deal with remote workforces and all the nuances that are important, but it's easy to lose sight of, well, how do we back up and look at the bigger picture of what's the real lesson, of the real takeaway, or the real strategic imperative, which for a lot of organizations is, how do we provide a more flexible work environment, or how do we provide a more flexible customer experience that can adapt quickly to the next pandemic or the next whatever, macroeconomic or pandemic or whatever sort of curveball might get thrown the way of this client or any organization. So I think that's a good takeaway, is how can we take those lessons from 2020 and apply it to longer term thinking to give us the competencies and the capabilities we need longer term. It's good advice. What are some of the biggest challenges, or I don't want to say problems, but maybe challenges or opportunities for improvement? And I think you've alluded to some of this around customer experience and business processes and things like that. But are there any other challenges or areas of improvement that were uncovered in this process that we factored into the overall strategy and roadmap that we recommended?
Yeah, I'd say that generally speaking, some of the takeaways or improvements are that we need to keep the customer experience in mind as a business in terms of how does it look from the customer's perspective. I think a lot of times, or oftentimes, as systems are implemented or a company goes to market, there's a focus on, okay, we know how to deliver, and that's what we're going to do best. And sometimes, the customer sees it a different way. And I think it bears in mind whether we're making, complex medical devices or we're making, a simple widget. The customer experience is paramount to success of the company, because overall, that's going to determine how we deliver, supply, build our product. And if we start at the beginning, working back towards the customer, I think that's always going to be met with success.
What closing words of wisdom would you give to our audience here today that's trying to figure out what our strategy or roadmap for our transformation is going to be in 2021? What are some of the big takeaways you have from this client that you think might apply to other organizations out there?
Well, I think really the biggest takeaways, and I think where we learned not only from this client and from this type project, but I think it really emphasized the ability and the need to take things and put them in very succinct categories and be very clear as far as what it is you're trying to accomplish, and really simplify things. And our client from the beginning felt that, he recognized the fact that this could very quickly turn into a rabbit hole project where we're chasing 13 or 14 different things, and we're going to spend a year and we're never really going to get an answer. So we were very fortunate in the sense that he knew the pitfalls and was able to work through them with us, and was able to agree on a path that really simplified X, Y, and Z, put it in these buckets, and we'll address this, and we'll get a strategy. And then down the road, we might need to adjust the customer. We're going off of basically customer needs today and what they think they are in the future. So we're trying to give him a tool set and technology that allows him to react, because what we think the customer is going to want in the future is we're hoping that it's going to be pretty accurate for what they want, but it's not going to be the same. There is always going to be the adjustment. So I think my takeaway and third stage takeaway on all the projects that we have is really simplifying things and really keeping things at a very manageable the ability to talk through things and really have everyone on the same page for what we're trying to accomplish in very simple terms.
How about you, Braden? Anything you'd add to that, or other takeaways or words of wisdom you'd offer up to anyone that's about to go through this process?
Yeah, I think Nate said it well. If we can keep the experience simple to the point that there's an end in sight for success. I think that's always a good goal in terms of both near and long term to understand what are we trying to achieve, and let's not get lost in the weeds. So many of our projects, have inherent complexity, and it's very easy to get tripped up on the complexity. But if you keep the end goal in mind, it's something to always refresh on every day.
Yeah, it's well put, and I think you guys said it well that the end state or the end goal wasn't necessarily or isn't necessarily in this case to implement new technology to replace the old technology. Is to figure out all that stuff we started off talking about, which is how do we make for a better customer experience, better business processes, and simplification of our environment. I mean, that's really the end goal, and it sounds like a no-brainer as we're talking about it, but I think a lot of times you guys are right. The organizations and clients we work with tend to get fixated on technology, and then they go down these rabbit holes of technical complexity and things that it's just it's not necessarily, and it's not aligned with what you're trying to accomplish necessarily as a business. So that's really good closing advice. So I want to thank you guys for being on the show here today. I really appreciate it, and just thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thank you guys. When we come back, we'll be back with more with Transformation Ground Control.